Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a man must seek answers for his friend searching for love. So, do you believe in love at first sight? Because I fell in love with the strange woman in the window.
So she just sits there, I asked, and you're just staring at her like a creep?
No. It's not like that. It's like she wants you to look, grinned Reggie. She shows off her legs, her white little panties. She throws her red hair around.
That doesn't make you any less creepy.
She knows I'm there. Hell, last time she smiled at me.
She smiled at you, I scoffed. A human woman actually smiled at you. You, Reggie.
I get a hell of a lot more smiles than you,
He teased.
and I swear, she smiled at me. I'm telling you, I'm in love.
Tinder not working out for you? Super likes not getting you anywhere?
If I had to choose between a random woman smiling at me from a window once every 2 weeks, or getting a match that isn't a bot on the Tinder meat market, I'd choose Window Girl 10 times out of 10.
I'll drink to that. And so we did. 6 shots of tequila and a game of pool later, we said our goodbyes. Then he disappeared. One day, he was just gone. No messages, no logins, no goodbyes, no witnesses, no indication of him going anywhere. There were rumors of him being attacked. There'd been news of an up-and-coming masked gang harassing a neighboring town, but nothing was confirmed. The police did a decent job bringing in the usual suspects, but nothing came of it. They even had search parties looking around the old campgrounds. There was talk of having a diver check the lake, but I don't think they ever did. Of course, they were following all leads, but that one thing Reggie'd rambled about on that last night when I saw him. The pretty girl who'd smiled at him from a window. It was a struggle to find out anything about her. This is a big town. Reggie traveled pretty far from work to home. I must have traveled that same road 100 times, back and forth, looking for whatever window he could have seen her in. But he wasn't very specific. There were apartments, houses, rentals, motels, hundreds of windows all along the road. How would I know which one he'd been looking at? I started taking Reggie's road home every day, just to see if I could see what he saw. It was a hassle, but it gave me a pretty good idea about where he'd look, what he'd do. It wasn't a long way out of my way, and I wasn't planning on doing it forever. So I told myself I had to at least try. 6 weeks after his disappearance, I was ready to give up. The police already had. The case had gone cold. There were no more leads to follow. One night, as I followed that same damn road, I stopped at a corner shop to get a Coke. Standing with a cold can in the evening breeze, a thought struck me. Maybe the woman wasn't just someone he happened to see randomly. Maybe it was someone he went out of his way to see. Someone slightly off his usual route. Like someone you might see when you step out to get a Coke. Right across the street from the corner store, just above a bookstore, was a small apartment and had this wide window alcove that overlooked the street. There was someone sitting in the window. She wasn't at all what Reggie had described. She wasn't flaunting her underwear or flipping her hair around. She was this 20-something young woman, cuddled up in the alcove, reading. She had these big, dorky glasses and long brown hair. Not red like Reggie had said. Striking green eyes, just like my first crush had, back in middle school. Still, I couldn't help but to stare. This had to be her. This was the woman Reggie had talked about, and I could see why he'd fallen in love. It was damn near impossible not to. I must have stood there for the better part of 5 minutes. I had every intention to check the address, see who lived there, and try to find out all I could about her. And yet all I did was stand there and gawk as she gently turned the pages. Then, as soon as her head moved in my direction, I looked away and hurried back to my car. It was embarrassing to say the least. I could still see her in the rearview mirror as I got back out on the road. I'd talk to her the next day. Or maybe the day after that, whenever I could work up the courage and maybe find out a bit more about her. I did find out a few things. That corner apartment wasn't a rental, so someone owned it. It hadn't been sold in the past 20 or so years, so whoever owned it had lived there for a while. It was one of the older houses in town, and there were pictures of it from all the way back in the 60s. Even the same bricks, only slightly paled by the sun. The following weekend, I went back during the day. This time, the window was empty. I took the time to just walk around and check the place out, see if I could get a name. I took the time to check out the bookstore under the apartment. It was this old, dusty place that I'd seen for years, but never actually bought anything from. It was run by these two older men, bickering about some nonsense in one of the back rooms. As soon as I entered and that bell rang, I saw their two heads peeking out. "Hey," I called out. You the owners?" They looked at each other, paused, and sighed in unison. One of them, the one without a lengthy beard, approached me.
You looking for something?
He asked, "It's about the apartment. I don't know if you..." They both rolled their eyes. The man in the back shook his head and went back to his computer.
Of course you are.
The beardless old man sighed.
I'm sorry. We can't help you.
"I'd appreciate whatever you know. You've never talked to her?"
I haven't even seen her, sorry. My partner told me he's seen her brother once.
I could hear a jubilant, "I have," from the back room. I got the feeling that they'd had this discussion a few times already.
I'm sorry, they keep to themselves. We don't want to bother them.
"Have they never been down here? Bought anything? I saw her reading."
Might have,
He nodded.
but I wouldn't know. I don't ask every customer where they live. Maybe we ought to start.
He gave me an apologetic shrug and returned to the counter. I thanked them, waved, and left. I asked around the neighborhood. Random people on the street, passers-by who seemed familiar with the area. At one point, I called out to a half-naked woman sunbathing in her yard. I talked to a dozen or so people. No one had anything clear to say about the woman who lived above the bookstore. Some claimed she lived alone, others said she lived with her brother. Some thought it was her father or her husband. But it was clear she wasn't living alone. One man claimed he'd seen an older woman walking around up there, so maybe it was a whole family. Then again, they didn't seem to have a car, and no one had seen them leave. I was getting a funny feeling about the girl living there. It wasn't a large apartment, so I couldn't imagine so many people living there. One or two, sure, but 3, 4? No way. I decided to take matters into my own hands. It took me a lot of stomping around to build up the courage, but I made my way up the stairs to the apartment door. The name on the door just said More. Strange family name. I stood outside her door for a solid minute before I knocked. Had I known she wasn't home, I wouldn't have bothered. I knocked 2 more times, but there was no one to answer. Instead, I just stood there like an idiot. If I'd had any paper, I'd left a note. I did take a mental note of the other 2 apartments on the same floor being empty, though. Strange. I started going by that street regularly, once a day, waiting for her to show up in the window again. Every day, sometimes more than once, I passed that street. I was starting to wonder if I was still doing this to find out what happened to Reggie, or if I was genuinely interested in that woman I'd seen in the window. Maybe it wasn't even the same person. After all, she looked nothing like the woman Reggie had described. It took me 2 weeks of diligent watching to finally see her again. When I did, I nearly got in an accident. I slammed on my brakes, shocking the driver behind me. I parked outside the corner store, and I just stood in the middle of the dark street, gawking at her. It was the same woman, same brown hair, another book it looked like, and she'd cuddled up with a blanket. There was a cup of something warm next to her, fogging up the inside of the window. I could see those emerald eyes all the way down the street. She was magnificent. In a moment of onset stupidity, I waved at her. I couldn't help myself. To my surprise, she turned to me. She put down her book, tilted her head, and met my gaze. She looked bored, frustrated even. There I was, some random man on the street, waving at a young woman in the privacy of her home. I was being an idiot. Then she smiled at me, and I fell in love. This warm, genuine emotion. She was so happy to see me. She was eager to meet me, I could tell. I had to go see her. I ran across the parking lot, crossed the street, and went around the back of the building. But as I put my hand on the door to the apartment complex, I felt a tiny drop of water on the back of my hand. For a moment, it made me stop, just long enough to think. As one drop turned into 100, I snapped out of it. This was too strange. I'm not a bad-looking man, but finding myself running across the street to knock on a stranger's door, that ain't me. I wasn't being myself. Maybe the same thing had happened to Reggie. I wiped the rain from my face and went inside. I hadn't even noticed the strange blue mesh bags used for garbage piled in a corner of the hallway. This time, I felt a bit more observant, but I still walked up those stairs, and I still knocked on that door. Not just to see a pretty face, but to ask questions. This time, she was home. I knocked 3 times, firmly.
Come in.
A soft voice spoke. I just want to ask a few questions, I said, about a friend of mine.
Come in.
The voice repeated. I took a deep breath and felt the handle. It was open. This wasn't right. A lone woman letting a strange man into her apartment at this hour? Sure, this wasn't a big town, but this was just odd. Shouldn't she at least meet me at the door? I could see a shine from the peephole. She was nowhere near the door. She wasn't even looking out. Do you mind coming out for a sec? I asked. It won't take long.
Come in.
I'm sorry to bother you. It's just...
Come in.
My stomach slowly turned as a chill crept up my spine. I let go of the handle and backed away. I'm sorry. Can you hear me all right? I think the door...
Come in.
Oh, she heard me. No way she didn't. Was she mocking me? I need to talk to you. I'm not coming in. No response. A shadow suddenly blocked the light from the peephole. Someone was looking out at me, and I hadn't even heard her move. I took a step back, leaning against the wall across from the door. I should leave, I said. I'm not...
Come in.
This time the voice was harsher, insistent. It wasn't an invitation anymore, it was a request. I felt my heart skip a beat, and I just kept backing further and further away from the door. As I reached the stairs, I heard a mechanical sound. A click. A lock. I peeked down the stairs. I could see someone by the exit, a shadow locking the door from the outside. Reggie? I didn't get time to think as I heard a creaking noise. The front door was opening. She was coming out, and whoever had been downstairs disappeared into the night.
Come in.
This time the voice was dark, bubbling, like someone speaking underwater. All I got was a short glimpse. Her gorgeous brown hair, hiding a strange face. Scaly skin that changed tint as I looked at it. Too many eyes. Some blue, some brown, some striking green. The components of the beautiful woman I'd seen, scattered about something wrong. I would have stared at her forever, had I not been instinctively backing away. I lost all balance as I reached the edge of the stairs, and I tumbled backwards. It felt like an instant, like no time passed at all. I was suddenly on the ground floor looking up the stairs. I was bruised, my leg twisted. Behind me, I could feel the front door locked.
Come in.
I heard from the top of the stairs.
Come in. Come in.
A face peeked around the corner. It was rearranging, making itself pretty, discarding old teeth to regrow new ones. Little white molars danced their way down the stairs, only to turn to dust. She was changing hair color to black, and her skin to a Mediterranean tan. She was starting to resemble my first girlfriend. I closed my eyes and turned to the front door. I heard clumsy footsteps slowly make their way down the stairs behind me as I pounded on the door. I screamed for help, forcing myself to my feet. Another footstep.
Come in.
I kept screaming for help, pounding on the thick glass.
Come in.
There was a sudden heat near me, someone warm and inviting, the smell of exotic fruit shampoo, something resembling a hand reaching out to me, brushing against my jacket. Then someone stepped out. One of the old men from the bookstore, the beardless one. Instantly, I heard the footsteps behind me hurry, back up the stairs. The old man unlocked the door as I scrambled out of the complex. My twisted leg couldn't support me, so I fell flat onto the pavement, crawling backwards. Away from the thing I'd seen and smelled, the old man looked confused. Call the police, I stammered. Call them, dude. Oh my God. The old man brought out his phone and dialed the emergency number. He kneeled down next to me, putting his hand on my shoulder.
Are you okay?
He asked.
Did that man do something to you?
What?
The man. That young man by the stairs. Did he hurt you?
I just sat there on the pavement. I barely even moved until the police came. I told them I'd been attacked. I told them there was something wrong with the one living in the Morey apartment. I told them about Reggie, about the girl in the window. I must have just kept babbling on and on and on as they took me back to their squad car. The owner of the bookstore just looked at me apologetically and waved goodbye, giving a short statement to one of the officers. I don't think they did a damn thing to whoever or whatever lives in that apartment. I think they did nothing, found nothing, and just chalked it up to me being hysterical. I'm getting mixed messages depending on the officer I ask about it. One says, no one lives there. Another says, they're out of town. One claimed it was some sort of storage. No one is giving me a straight answer. I think Reggie is still out there. I think something was done to him, but I don't know what. I think he lost himself to whatever lives in that apartment. And sometimes, to this day, I stop by that corner store to see if there's someone in that window. And sometimes, there is.
Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a therapist finds himself in over his head when he gets an appointment from a woman with ties to the supernatural. So, do you trust strangers? Because she simply couldn't tell a lie.
When I met Dawn Anderson, I didn't know what to think. She'd booked a counseling session, seemingly out of the blue, and I had no prior information about her. She'd just called into the office, booked a session with my assistant, and popped up. It was a pale November Thursday and my final session for the day. The streetlight outside was in an awkward position, casting long shadows across my office. As I closed the blinds, Dawn shifted in her seat.
I've sought help before,
She admitted.
but I always get the impression that no one really listens.
Therapy is often misunderstood, I said. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It is just maintenance, like taking a shower or doing your dishes.
I haven't done my dishes in weeks.
She laughed. A darkness fell over her face as she hit herself upside the head repeatedly. Her curly brown hair swayed with each smack.
No,
She said,
I have done my dishes. It's fine. I was exaggerating. I'm not lying.
"No worries," I said, sitting down across from her. "Let's just have a chat and get to know each other."
That sounds good.
She nodded, calming down.
Thank you.
Dawn was born in '93 as the only child of Morgan and Lita Anderson of Tomskog, Minnesota. Dawn seemed a bit distant when talking about her childhood, as if repeating something she'd rehearsed.
They were very strict and distant. Sometimes they didn't seem like parents at all.
She said.
They had their moments, but there was no warmth.
She would go on to tell stories about how they beat her if they thought she was telling a lie. They once withheld food for 3 days because she didn't tell them what she'd done at school that day. Withholding information, they argued, was a form of lying. They did do nice things at times. They'd often take her swimming down at Frog Lake, and they always made sure her room had plenty of flowers and toys.
It was strange, though.
She admitted.
Going swimming was almost a chore. Twice a week, rain or shine.
When it was too cold to go swimming, they'd give her a mud bath, where she was thoroughly scrubbed.
It became routine, right down to rubbing my gums with it.
It was almost as if Dawn brushed it aside. To her, childhood and parenting wasn't important. She seemed more urgently distressed. And as she recounted her past, she would often stop to make sure she was remembering it right. Apparently, it was very important for her to be as accurate as possible, a remnant from her strict upbringing,
But I'm not here to talk about what used to be.
she said.
I'm here to talk about here and now.
All right, I nodded. Let's talk about it. Who are you today?
I'm a liar.
She sighed.
I've started telling lies.
I waited for her to add something to it, but that was it. That was her big reveal. I leaned back in my chair, clutching my notebook. Does it happen often? I asked.
Not really.
She shrugged.
Every now and then. But it really bothers me.
People tell little lies all the time, Dawn. That doesn't make them bad people.
They don't tell them like I do.
We locked eyes and I could tell she was sincere. This was something that truly bothered her. For her, this was like admitting a murder.
My lies are different from others.
She continued.
I don't know how to explain it. They change things.
Most lies do, I said. They change our perception. They manipulate.
Yes, but they only manipulate people.
She complained.
Lies don't change what really happens.
What do you mean, Dawn? She shifted uncomfortably in her chair. She took a deep breath and touched a curly strand of her brown hair for comfort. Meeting my eyes, she spoke in a low tone of voice.
The streetlight outside broke the moment you closed the blinds.
I looked back at the window. Strange how I hadn't noticed it. That awkward light would shine right into my patient's eyes. But it had gone dark. Very observant, I said. I didn't even notice.
That's because I lied.
She said.
It just seems true, but it isn't. That light worked just fine up until I said it didn't.
So you turned it off? I asked. With your lies?
Yes.
She was dead serious. I got up from my chair and peeked out the window. Just as she said, the light was completely broken. It was strange how I hadn't noticed it earlier. But sometimes you can get so caught up in routine that you don't notice the obvious. As I sat back down, she looked defeated.
That's the thing.
She sighed.
It is really hard to convince people that I'm telling the truth. That things change based on my lies.
How would that work exactly? I asked.
I don't know.
Dawn said.
But I didn't have an appointment when I came here today. I lied about it, and then suddenly I had one.
That's not right, I smiled. We had a call in last Tuesday. We got your number and everything. I held up my cell phone, showing her the booking receipt. There it is.
I change things.
Dawn insisted.
What I say changes things. It changes what has happened to accommodate for my lies.
So, when did this start, Dawn?
I think it has always been like this.
She said.
I think my parents knew. Maybe that's why they taught me never to lie.
But you started lying anyway, I said. Can you remember something recent?
There have been a few accidents.
Dawn said.
I used to have a friend who went to veterinary school, and an acquaintance who worked for a bank. We'd been out of touch for a few years, and when we met up, I got them mixed up. I was so convinced that the person who I talked to had gone to veterinary school.
But they didn't?
No. They worked at a bank, I'm sure of it. But now they had both gone to veterinary school. They couldn't have.
Memory is a fragile thing, I said. What is most likely? That you misremembered something or that your misunderstanding changed events that have already happened?
I know what you want me to answer, but the proof is overwhelming.
So, why did you come here today, Dawn?
I want to stop lying. I never want to tell a lie again.
She breathed a sigh of relief. I nodded, making notes in my notebook. What is stopping you, I asked. What stops you from being completely honest?
Honestly, it is addicting.
She said.
Once you start, it is hard to stop.
How so?
I don't think you understand. The possibilities are staggering. It's like, if you could win the lottery by snapping your fingers, what would stop you from just snapping your fingers all day?
Getting a sore thumb, I suppose.
That's what it feels like to me.
She said.
It's like having a sore thumb in my mind. Every lie I tell is just, it takes something away.
Life is full of little inconveniences, I said. I don't think you should punish yourself for finding ways to cope.
It is not just coping, and it is not just punishing myself. It just happens, like using a muscle too much. It aches. It hurts.
Is that why you hit yourself on the side of your head when we started talking?
Yeah,
She nodded.
it distracts from the pain inside.
Well, some of the things you're describing are impossible, Dawn. You can't change the past. I can see why you would like to, given the way you were raised, but it just can't be done,
I'm gonna stop you right there.
said Dawn, holding up her hand.
Tell me something you did this morning.
All right, I put on fresh white socks.
Then why don't you have any socks on?
As soon as I said it, I felt like an idiot. I'd stepped in a water puddle as I got to work and didn't have a spare pair with me. My wet socks were still hanging on the bathroom radiator. You didn't let me finish, I smiled. I do have them, just not on me right now.
No, see? It changes. It changes, and you just adapt to it.
She knocked herself on the side of her head, clenching her eyes shut. Sparkles of sweat ran down her forehead. Dawn, look at it from my point of view. What is more likely? That you saw I wasn't wearing socks and used that information, or that you can change the very fabric of events?
I know how it sounds, but that's what happens. And as long as it is just small things, all I get is a crackle in the back of my head. But as soon as I start telling big lies, it feels like I'm being ripped apart.
With big lies, do you mean something we can't ignore? Do you have any examples?
The first lie I ever told.
She nodded.
I had this dream of sunflowers when I was a kid. A whole field of them, all swaying in the wind. When I got to school, I drew them on a piece of paper. The yellow crayon was taken, so instead I colored them blue.
That sounds lovely.
It was, until I got home. Our entire backyard was this large field of blue sunflowers. My parents, of course, acted like it had always been there.
But it hadn't been.
No, Mom had a garden there. She grew tomatoes. We still had some in the fridge, but she insisted they were store-bought.
So they never found out you were lying?
Not at first, but I felt so bad that I admitted it. That's when I didn't get to eat for 3 days. They said it was because I hadn't told them about the drawing soon enough.
Well, I think you will find it difficult to convince me this is true, Dawn. But that is irrelevant. It is true to you, and that's what is most important. If you want to stop lying, there are ways to do so. But I'd like to get to the root of the problem and see where this comes from.
It bothers me that you don't believe me.
I'm sorry to hear that, Dawn. But what you're describing is simply impossible.
It bothers me greatly.
We looked at one another. Dawn wasn't budging, but neither was I.
How come you've pretended to write all this time when your pen has run out of ink?
It's just to put the patient at ease, I smiled, like a doctor with a stethoscope. It is expected, but not always practical.
The last 40 pages you've written is just the text, "Listen to Dawn," over and over.
Of course it is, I chuckled. That's how I practice my cursive.
And you don't see anything odd about this? Nothing at all?
Coincidences happen, but all that you point out are things I can clearly remember. I can't be surprised by a stated fact.
But that's just... ugh.
Dawn wiped her nose as a single drop of blood dripped out. I offered her a napkin, but she refused. This was clearly affecting her.
I've talked to 8 other people about this.
She said.
No matter what, they keep denying me. No matter what absurd proof I present, all they do is rationalize it and call me schizophrenic.
I don't think you are, Dawn. I think you have a trauma that...
It is not a fucking trauma.
Dawn stood up, pacing back and forth. She was getting agitated. I stood up next to her, carefully putting my hand on her shoulder. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Tea?
You're married, right?
She asked.
Do you love your wife?
Of course, with all my heart.
Do you, though? Do you really, really love her?
Undoubtedly. Dawn shook her head.
Can you feel right now the happiness she brings to your life?
Yes, but what...
Then why are you considering divorcing her?
It was like the twist of a knife in my chest. It was such an alien thought, but of course, I had been considering it for a long time. I couldn't think of a reason at the top of my head, and the way it made me feel was just awful. Patricia and I had had our ups and downs over the years, but we'd always grown stronger because of it. Sure, we'd hit a rough patch in the past few weeks, but...
You said you loved her.
Said Dawn.
You said you were happily married, then something changed.
Not changed as much as... I scratched my head. I felt strange, like something had flipped my world upside down. 2 drops of blood pushed themselves out of Dawn's eyes, little red tears.
You have to believe me.
Said Dawn.
Please believe me.
I'm trying, but...
Fine, let's go.
Growled Dawn.
Let's fucking go.
She put on her jacket and pushed me down into my chair. She was getting aggressive, and I considered calling for security. Then, as soon as I sat down, she sat down across from me. She took a hold of my hand and didn't let go.
Remember last night when you stabbed your wife?
She asked. How the fuck did she know? My mouth opened wide like a fucking trout as my mind started to race. There'd been no one else there. It had been an accident, a fluke. We had talked about our thoughts of a divorce, but it was nothing serious. Then it just escalated.
You buried her in the backyard. Your hands still smell like dirt. What do you think about that?
She continued. No, you can't. I could feel my body shutting down. Some sort of shock factor coursing through my brain. My hands started shaking, my eyes started tearing. I remembered it all so vividly. Patricia's soft hands covered by dirt, shovel after shovel. The way I scrubbed my hands, but couldn't get rid of the smell. I still had dirt under my fingernails. It had happened, but I'd tried to push it away. To pretend like nothing, an alibi.
Why would you do that? You loved her, didn't you?
I did. I'd loved Patricia with every bone of my being.
And yet you kept her head in a plastic wrap in the back of your goddamn freezer.
Of course. I couldn't let her go. I broke down. I cried like a fucking baby. There was no way Dawn could have known this. I had barely even admitted it to myself. Compartmentalizing. There were 1,000 little reasons leading up to what I'd done. But to have it all splayed out like this in front of me, it was too much. My world was crumbling. My peace of mind had already rested on the knife's edge, ready to tip me over the side, but now I felt like I was free-falling. A pale hand feeding the worms outside. A bathroom smelling of chlorine and bleach. Perfectly good hacksaw that I couldn't bear to look at ever again. Green eyes staring at me through thin plastic, asking me why. I threw myself out of the chair, enraged. She couldn't know. Dawn were suddenly bleeding out of her mouth, eyes, and nose. Still, she smiled.
Every time.
She laughed.
Why does no one ever listen?
You've said enough.
Really?
Dawn pushed me away, breaking the leg of the table between us. As I landed on my back, she held me down with a hat rack.
You drowned your daughter in a well. You ran over your mother with your car. You've killed 3 hitchhikers using the loaded rifle in the trunk of your car.
I just screamed as the memories came flooding back to me. It was true. All of it. How the fuck did she know? It had been years. I'd covered my tracks so well. I got a hold of her foot and dragged her down to the floor next to me. I could barely see her in between my teary eyes, but I had to do something. I had to stop the pain. I had to end her. I tried to get my hands around her neck, but she resisted. She was stronger than I thought.
Then again,
She coughed as one of my hands touched her neck.
all I've said today has been a lie, hasn't it?
My mind went completely blank. As my eyes lost focus, I saw Dawn getting up. Her eyes were completely red swollen with blood. She kept beating the side of her head with the palm of her hand, coughing all the while. I'd probably given her a bruise. It was, but
It takes a while to rationalize the bigger stuff.
she said
Give it some time.
I didn't do any of that. I didn't.
Of course not. All I said was a lie.
But why, how,
I think that's enough.
sighed Dawn.
I can't say I'm surprised. No one ever believes me. Just try to remember me as Dawn Anderson, a young human woman, and not the way you've truly seen me.
As she left the office, I was still sitting on the floor. I couldn't even understand why. I had no reason to be upset or attack her. Sure, she'd been provoking me with mental images of harm coming to my family, but to attack her like that, it was insanity. Stress-induced hysteria or something. I sat alone in my office, feeling the pale light of the streetlight outside warm the back of my neck. I don't know what to believe. And I don't know if I will eventually rationalize all of this to some insane degree. But I know that it shook me to my core. There was something about Dawn that I had never seen in another patient. And to some degree, I believe she knows something impossible. And when I went home to open my freezer that night, I was genuinely scared to see something look back at me, even though Patricia was sleeping soundly in the other room. But the shock of hearing what Dawn had said, and the images it conjured in my mind, it remained. The untouched spot in my backyard, the hacksaw in the garage. It was still there, unused. I held Patricia tight that night as I dreamt of murder, as if it had really happened, if only for a while.